Hey, welcome to Knowables. You think vampires are just characters from spooky legends or the silver screen? Think again. Imagine a world where vampires aren't lurking in ancient castles or hiding in myths. They're living among us, right now. Intrigued? You should be. Today, we're diving deep into the real-life vampire community, a shadowy group with bizarre rituals, unsettling beliefs, and a lifestyle just as strange as fiction. But before we get into the unsettling details of this secret society, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, or you might just sense something lurking in the shadows when you go to bed tonight. Let's dive in. Real vampires exist, and they're nothing like the ones you've seen in movies. They live secret lives with rituals that are both ancient and shockingly modern. The real-life vampire community is a global subculture of people who believe they either are vampires or embody certain vampiric traits. And no, they're not supernatural creatures flying in bat form. But these aren't some fringe, isolated weirdos either. There are far more of them than you'd expect, hidden in plain sight. Vampires could be your neighbors, your coworkers, even the person sitting next to you on the bus. Creeped out yet? Good. Let's go even deeper. What exactly makes these people call themselves vampires? There are two primary types: sanguinarians and psychic vampires. Both believe they need to feed on something most of us never even think about. And trust me, things are about to get weird. Let's start with the sanguinarians, the real-life blood drinkers. Yep, you heard me right. These people believe they must consume human blood to stay healthy. It's not some chaotic bloodbath either. Many have donor agreements, where people willingly give them blood in controlled, sterile environments. Sounds insane. It gets even weirder. Sanguinarians claim that without drinking blood, they suffer from extreme fatigue, depression, and even a slow wasting away. They don't drink blood for thrills or vampire cosplay. To them, it's essential for their physical and spiritual well-being. They compare it to a craving for food or water, something their body needs that it can't get from anywhere else. And while you might think it's dangerous, these rituals are often shockingly organized. Sterile equipment, close bonds between the donor and the vampire, and strict rules keep things in check. They don't see themselves as monsters. They see themselves as people with a unique need. But hold on to your seat, because the next group is just as strange, if not stranger. Meet the psychic vampires. These vampires don't drink blood. Nope, what they crave is life energy, and they believe it's just as vital to them as blood is to the sanguinarians. Have you ever hung out with someone who just drained your energy, leaving you completely exhausted? According to psychic vampires, that's exactly what they're doing, feeding on your emotional and spiritual energy. And here's the spooky part. They can feed on you without you ever knowing it. They say they can draw energy from you in crowded spaces, intimate moments, or even during a simple conversation. You won't feel a thing until you realize you're completely wiped out afterward. Some psychic vampires cultivate relationships with willing energy donors. These donors agree to share their energy through various rituals, meditation, or even just by being near the vampire. They claim to balance the energy exchange, making sure no harm is done. But not everyone agrees. Some people report feeling drained for days after an encounter with a psychic vampire, leading skeptics to question whether this exchange is truly harmless. But this isn't just a strange hobby for these people. The real-life vampire community is deeply structured and ritualistic. They organize themselves into houses or clans, operating like secret societies. These groups have their own leaders, traditions, and initiation ceremonies. And yes, these ceremonies can be as dark as you're imagining, complete with oaths, energy-sharing rituals, and sometimes even bloodletting. It's a whole world you never knew existed, with its own rules and hierarchy. Some vampires even claim they can trace their roots back to ancient times, to mystical traditions passed down through secret societies. While you might be skeptical of these claims, one thing is certain. This community has been around far longer than most people realize. It's been hiding in the shadows, keeping its ancient beliefs alive. Now, here's where things take an even more curious twist. Many real-life vampires believe they're working toward a kind of spiritual immortality. While they don't think they'll live forever physically, they believe feeding on blood or energy allows their spirit to transcend death. They see themselves as ancient souls, living multiple lifetimes through reincarnation, carrying wisdom and knowledge from centuries past. Some claim their vampirism gives them the ability to sense danger, or even perceive auras around other people. It sounds far-fetched, but for these vampires, it's not just a belief, it's how they live their lives every day. And for them, this isn't a choice or a lifestyle, it's a survival mechanism. They need this energy, or blood, to feel alive, to maintain balance and to sustain their existence. But hold up, Not everyone sees the vampire community as a harmless group of spiritual people. Some critics argue that these practices, especially blood drinking, are dangerous, both physically and psychologically. Drinking human blood, even in small amounts, carries risks of infection, disease, and potential psychological consequences. And what about the psychic vampires? Some people who've encountered them claim they were left feeling completely drained for weeks. Critics worry that energy feeding, even when consensual, can cross boundaries. They argue that the line between fantasy and reality can blur, particularly for those already struggling with mental health. So while some see the vampire community as a spiritual movement, others see it as something much darker, perhaps even dangerous. Still not convinced this is real? Let's get into some true encounters that'll send shivers down your spine. There's one case that stands out, an incident so infamous it sparked a vampire panic in the late 1800s. This is the story of Mercy Brown, a 19-year-old girl from Exeter, Rhode Island, who, even in death, was believed to be a vampire. In the 1890s, Mercy Brown died of tuberculosis, then called consumption. Soon after, other members of her family began falling ill with the same disease. The townspeople believed that Mercy, despite being dead, was rising from the grave and feeding on her family, causing their illnesses. A desperate crowd, driven by fear, exhumed her body. What they found sent chills down their spines. Her body was oddly well preserved, leading the townspeople to believe that she was, in fact, a vampire. In a grisly ritual, they removed her heart and liver, burned them, and fed the ashes to her brother, who was ill at the time. They believed this would cure him of the curse. This bizarre act wasn't an isolated incident. During this time, across New England, there were other reports of vampire panics, where communities dug up bodies of deceased loved ones, hoping to stop them from feeding on the living. While modern science debunked these beliefs, the story of Mercy Brown remains one of the most infamous real-life vampire cases, fueling the legends that persist to this day. Let's move on to Jacques Saint-Germain, often referred to as the Vampire King of New Orleans. This modern-day vampire, who first appeared in the French Quarter in the early 2000s, became notorious for his eerie resemblance to Comte de Saint-Germain, an 18th-century figure who was believed to be a vampire and an alchemist. Jacques, a wealthy and charismatic man, threw elaborate parties in his New Orleans mansion, and locals began to notice something strange about him. Despite his charm, he never seemed to age, and never ate or drank in front of others. But that wasn't the eerie part. Guests who spent time alone with him often reported a feeling of complete exhaustion afterward, as though their energy had been drained. But here's the kicker. In 2004, a woman who attended one of Jacques' infamous parties fled his mansion in the middle of the night, screaming for help. She claimed that Jacques had attempted to bite her neck, and as she tried to escape, she jumped from the second-story balcony. When police arrived at the scene, they found no trace of blood or a struggle inside the mansion, only some unsettling items. The most disturbing? A collection of old, dusty vials, some of them containing a dark, red substance. Shortly after the incident, Jacques disappeared, leaving behind his luxurious mansion and a trail of whispers about his true nature. To this day, many in New Orleans believe that Jacques Saint-Germain was more than just a wealthy eccentric, that he was a real-life vampire, continuing a centuries-old legacy of the Saint-Germain vampire lineage. If that wasn't enough, here's one from 2010. Let me take you to Atlanta, Georgia. That year, the city became the center of attention when a series of bizarre events led to rumors of vampire attacks. It started with a young woman named Megan, who attended a gathering of people claiming to be part of the vampire community. Megan was fascinated by the subculture and decided to learn more, becoming friends with a group of blood-drinking sanguinarians. One night, after a small private party, Megan felt something was off. Over the following weeks, she reported feeling constantly tired, weak, and emotionally drained, even though she hadn't agreed to any blood rituals. Then came the night she would never forget. During an evening at one of the vampire houses, Megan claimed that a member of the group tried to forcibly drink her blood, even after she had declined. Panicked, she fought off the attacker and fled, only to find herself feeling like her energy had been sapped away. Megan reported the incident, which led to a string of accusations within the local vampire community. People began whispering that certain members were taking things too far, feeding on the life force of others without their consent. Although no criminal charges were pressed, Megan's story sent shockwaves through the vampire community in Atlanta, sparking a larger conversation about ethical vampirism and consent. This incident, though unsettling, brought attention to the darker side of the vampire subculture. It showed that even within their structured communities, not everything is always under control. So, what's the truth? Is the vampire community a misunderstood spiritual group? Or is there something far more dangerous lurking in the shadows? While many see these practices as harmless rituals, others argue that drinking blood and energy feeding can have real harmful effects. There's the physical danger of blood consumption, risking infections and diseases. And when it comes to energy feeding, some people who've encountered psychic vampires claim they were left feeling emotionally drained for weeks. For the vampire community, these practices are essential to their well-being and identity. But for skeptics, it's hard to ignore the psychological and physical risks. Are these people connecting with ancient traditions? Or are they simply feeding off the vulnerabilities of others? So, now that you know the truth, what do you think? Would you dare to meet a real-life vampire or step into their world? Drop a comment below and let us know, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next time you feel inexplicably energy zapped around someone, you just might want to remember this story. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and watch out behind you.